Alright. Hi, good day, and my name is Dr. Adli Ramdan. Welcome officially to my book launch for Trauma to PTSD. I want to take this opportunity to thank each and everyone for joining in, and I want to say a special thanks to everyone who has been part of the team, from my family to everyone who has been so on my review team. There's a lot of different professionals that have been on my team, from doctors to pastors to religious leaders to having master's degree and different exposures of things like trauma and PTSD. So what I want to say is that I want to thank each and everyone for their contribution towards this book. My book goes all the way back from me writing my thesis on this topic of trauma and PTSD. I had an interest because I was in the military for 6 years. I served in the United States Army for 6 years as part of the National Guard. Following that, I started developing an interest into the topic of trauma and PTSD. I served one deployment in the Middle East, in Kuwait and Iraq, for Operation Inherent Resolve. And I also had my younger brother is also in the military. He also served as well, being overseas. So we have family experience of people being in the military, being exposed to all the trauma that comes with the military. With that being said, it's not so much just a matter of the trauma being in the military that I wanted to highlight. I actually wanted to, this book is more so to highlight trauma in general. There's a lot of people that experience trauma, right? It's not an easy thing for people to admit necessarily, and it's real as yesterday, more or less, and we try to deny it, and we don't always realize the impact that it's had on our lives. So as we go through life in general, we experience different types of stresses, we experience different types of traumas, and the goal of this book is to sort of bring clarity to those roots of traumas and how they affect us as individuals, how they restrict us from growing. And then I also went into a little bit more about digging deeper to find ways in order to help yourself to sort of overcome various issues with the trauma. So I have a couple people on here that are actually individuals who have reviewed the book. So I'm going to ask them to join in and say a few words on what are their thoughts about the book. So I'm going to start with you, Darren.
Hi, good afternoon. When Dr. Ramdan shared that he was writing the book, I was really happy, firstly, for this huge accomplishment. And just getting into the text, I was amazed at just how many things he touched on, and that are real, and things that we all can relate to. And I've said this to him that it couldn't have come at a more
recording in progress.
And the time, especially with the things that we're dealing with right now. It's a must read, in my opinion, as he goes into great detail, just explaining and just highlighting different aspects of trauma and so on. So those are my few thoughts.
All right. Thank you, Darren. Thank you for sharing. And I appreciate you taking the time to review the book and for your feedback.
You're welcome.
Dr. Jan?
Hi, good afternoon. So I just think that Dr. Ramdan's book is really relevant and really important because of all its content, and also because of the almost normalization of what we need to have as normal, in that at least in the American culture, to me, it's like death in our culture, in that it's very taboo to talk about it. There's a lot of mystery, and yet it affects everyone. And I feel like with Dr. Ramdan's book is to, when I say normalize it, make us understand that there's trauma in many different presentations, in many different ways, and probably everybody has some greater and different than others. But like grief and trauma and PTSD, that it is hugely underappreciated and not acknowledged as being part of the fabric of our, body, mind, spirit balance. So as Darren said, it's really comes at a good time too, as we as a culture and as a globe are emerging from something that is very traumatic. And so kudos and hats off, because I think it's going to be a terrific tool, and I'm so very happy to be part of it. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Botwick. Dr. Kirsten, welcome. And do you want to take a little time to introduce yourself and say your thoughts on the book?
Hello, Dr. Ramdan. Firstly, just thank you so much for creating this resource. Like everyone has said, it's the information that you were able to compile into this book concisely, clearly, in a way that people can actually access the information and understand it, I think is one of the most important aspects of it, right? It's so accessible, and that's what we really need. We need more people talking about it in the way that you are. And just like Dr. Jen had mentioned, the fact that you are able to kind of break down how the different ways that PTSD can present itself, I think allows people to feel seen, and that acknowledgement, right, of, okay, this may be what I've been experiencing, or even just better understanding our friends, our colleagues, if you're a practitioner, our clients, right, just having that better understanding so that we can be more compassionate, and so that we can meet people where they're at, and so that when we approach even a stranger, right, we can come with this understanding that we all have our own story, and that we're all kind of just gaining more awareness about ourselves as we go. And so I think it just, in general, it can make us better human beings, right? So to me, I don't think you don't have to really come to this book knowing that maybe you've experienced trauma. You can come to this book wanting to better understand trauma and PTSD as a whole, right? Because I think that's really how we begin to better understand one another, how we really begin to create a more compassionate community. And that's really what I feel like you're doing. You're helping to bridge those gaps for people, so that we can just have a more compassionate community, which will then create more access to resources, right? We all know about the bias that there is when it comes to trauma and to mental health in general. And so the more that we talk about it, the better understanding that we have, the more resources can be created, and the more access to care people will have, right? So this is really a domino effect of creating better access. So yeah, so thank you so much. I can't say enough about what this book really does, I think, for the community at large. So thank you for your energy and your effort and your knowledge, and putting that all into an accessible resource for people. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Doc. We also have Carrie here. I'm going to ask Carrie if she wants to join in and say a couple words of her thoughts about the book itself.
Sure. All right, I'm on my phone. Can you hear and see me?
We could hear you and see you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so kind of like I started off my review by saying this, I personally don't have PTSD, but, it took me many, many years of therapy to kind of process trauma that I had experienced. And, that as you mentioned, we all experience trauma in some capacity, whether it's on a smaller or a bigger scale. So, not to say that I think that I know it all, but reading this book, I was like, oh my gosh, there's more to learn still, and I think that was awesome for me as an individual to come to that realization because, as I said, I've been in therapy and I thought that like, oh, I'm doing really well. And I am, but there's still more to recognize and to learn about myself and to learn about in general. So I think it was really helpful for me, like as from personal experience to read that. And, as you know, my husband, your brother, he's in the military. So I'm kind of surrounded by, you and him and all of his obviously work friends who are also in the military. And so for me to have a better understanding of PTSD, I think is really, really important. And not just for me, obviously, but for the whole, as someone mentioned, the whole community in general. So yeah, I found it really helpful and also really amazing that it's being talked about because mental health, I think, is finally like been on the rise in the last few years in terms of, people are discussing it, and especially with quarantine, like a lot of people, were struggling, still are struggling. So it's nice to see that it's coming and that people are more comfortable talking about it. So yeah, I learned a lot from this, and I think I said this in my review, but like one of the biggest things that I loved was the boundaries and setting boundaries, because when you do have either PTSD or trauma on a smaller scale, or just in general, if you're just a normal, regular human being living life, like boundaries are really important to set, and that's something that I'm working on currently. So reading that, I was like, wow, this resonates with me right now. So yeah, I think it was great. It was wonderful. And I think something that I didn't mention in my read, but that I want to add is that it was easy to understand. Like I didn't struggle reading this and think like, what does that mean? Or how does that relate to me? Or how does that relate to someone who does have PTSD? Like you went into different causes and you went into, solutions. Like I thought it was just very easy to understand. And so you did a really great job, and I'm really glad that I was able to be a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Just going to switch back these cameras around. So I just want to say thanks to Carrie for her feedback, and thanks to all the other individuals who's given their reviews. Something that Carrie touched on that, and I'm only saying Carrie because she was the last one to talk, that it's simple. And one of the things that happened with this book is that when I decided to publish the book, Dr. Tersha, who is my publisher, she asked, one of the first questions she asked is, who is your target audience? And I was telling her that part of my journey towards doing this is that I did my thesis on this topic, I did multiple presentations on this topic, and I wanted to be able to share this information to different individuals and as much people as I possibly could. And that question kind of made me start thinking more and more. I know for me as an individual, a lot of times I have to break things down as simple as I could. I use a lot of analogies for me to understand things as well. So that's how I ended up trying to write it, from my thesis, going from my thesis being very science-based to now structuring it in more of an easier way for people to understand. Because I feel like if I kept it as a scientific book, I'm only limiting the amount of people that could have access to the book and understand the simplicity of things like trauma. And in the science community, more so with people who deal specifically with mental health, you would find they being the one who would talk about these issues, but the general public don't really bring it up as an issue. And I think more and more people definitely need to make it a common theme. And I could tell you from the culture that I grew up in, the West Indian culture and even Asian culture as general, mental health tends to be something that has a huge stigma. And I know every culture has a stigma towards it, but I could only say from my cultural background stigma towards it. And it's something that has been opening up more and more. I see it even with patients, like you bring up the topic of trauma, you bring up the topic of stress and how it affects you. And patients automatically sort of turn away from that. They feel like it's inappropriate. They shouldn't be talking about it. It's something personal, or it's too personal to bring up. And that was one of my goals for the book, is that to make it an everyday conversation for people to be comfortable enough to open up about different things, different aspects of trauma that has been affecting them. In this book, I've talked about things like social justice being an issue, things like transgenerational trauma, intergenerational trauma, which are passed on from generation to generation. Some of these things are added on from what I've done in my thesis, because, like you said, Carrie, and some of the other doctors said, that you learn more as you go along the way. It's not a set field where everything fits into one place. So I can anticipate that a couple of years from now, there's more information that comes out about it as we start speaking more about this topic of trauma and PTSD and how stress affects us. So I do feel that as soon as we could get to switching this to becoming more of a routine topic that people are more comfortable to discuss, families are more comfortable to discuss between parents and children feel more comfortable to talking about to parents about these things. I feel like those things are definitely what is important with this book. So I'm happy again for everyone who is taking this opportunity to join in here today. I want to share the website that I have for my book. It's traumatoptsd.com. Pretty straightforward. It's the title of the book, more or less, and it would be sending you to a link to Amazon to be able to purchase the ebook today. My goal is honestly to hit bestseller, and to hit bestseller, everything's designed in such a way that you need to max out on a certain amount of sales in a certain amount of period. Algorithms that designed by all of these social media places and every website. So in order for it to be able to increase in that visibility on Amazon, more and more people that purchase it, more and more people that do reviews would actually help the book to be promoted. And I know a lot of people have had the opportunity to review the book. There's some things that I added even after I sent out the review. And I want to say a special thanks to the Vibio community. It's a new app that is coming out. It's called Vibio app. And I would definitely recommend checking it out for anybody interested. It's sort of I would like to think of it more of like as a freedom app. There is less censorship that goes on with it. And the reason I said that it inspired me is because within the book, I talked about using things like art therapy. I talked about things like using like written exposure therapy, writing therapy, and different types of exposure therapy as one means of dealing with PTSD, dealing with trauma. And I use it with patients. But being involved with the Vibio team and the launching of the app and all of these things, they sort of pushed me towards coming up with the idea of, and I also want to thank, I guess, Dr. Tertia as well, because when we had to design the book cover, she said, send it out to your audience, see what they think about it. And then combine that with Vibio app. They were also talking about using art for therapy. So I came up with the idea of using the cover as a coloring version for anyone who buys the book. So it's gonna look sort of like this, where it's just a very blank version of the cover itself. And my goal is that everybody who buys the book utilizes this opportunity to do art therapy, right? And I want you to post it on social media, tag my pages, Universal Tree Health Clinic on Instagram, on Facebook, and share it. And my goal is that, depending on how quickly I get them back, will depend on how quickly I do it. But my goal is to post a compilation of all the pictures that people send back to me. So I'd love it if everybody who does it actually puts, whether it's their initial, whether they want to sign it, whether they want to put their name in bold print, however they want to do it. But I want you to have some type of connection that whenever you see it later down, you could be like, you know what, that is mine. And I felt connected to the book. I felt like I was able to heal by even just doing this. And it may not heal every single thing that you're dealing with, but at least if it could help you in any little aspect of it is what is important. So like I said, the goal is to have as much people do it, and I'm eventually going to be able to share it on my social media pages and my YouTube channel as well. So the other thing that I added as well was in terms of the writing. I've always used writing sort of as a getaway for me. I've had a couple of friends who've read my stuff, and this is more writing in terms of like poetry. And I was again inspired by some of the reviews that I got to share some of my personal writings as well, so that it could inspire people to even use writing to help heal with PTSD. Again, like I said in the book, it's not necessarily a set format that you have to use for writing. And this is one of the biggest thing with PTSD and trauma, and that I've found that it's the patient has to be able to connect to their healing modality, and that's the best way that they could express whatever is going on. So be it through art, be it through writing, be it through coloring, drawing, singing, music, whatever it is, you could utilize it. It doesn't have to necessarily be structured where you have to come in and necessarily sit down and talk to a doctor for an hour. I'm going to share a little bit about my personal experience. When I came back from deployment, I had problems adjusting, trouble with sleep and stuff like that, and trouble even in school, like adjusting to school. My professors started noticing it. My grades started dropping, and my professors was like, "What is going on?" And when you get stuck in trauma, you don't realize what is going on. When you experience being on deployment, you're exposed to a constant environment every single day, and it happens not just with people on deployment, but it happens with people in general. If you live in a traumatic area, if you're in an abusive relationship, if you live in an abusive home, this happens. You get so comfortable, or you get so used to living in that specific environment, that when you try to step out of that, it doesn't feel normal. So the first thing you gravitate towards is trauma. So you have a draw to going back towards dealing or feeling like you need to experience trauma. And my difficulty, like I said, was trouble sleeping. My first good night of sleep was actually, there was helicopters that was flying over Bridgeport. And that was actually my first good night of sleep, because on deployment, one of our background songs is helicopters flying around. So it made me feel comfortable during that time, that I don't have to necessarily panic about every little sound that is going on. Pushing forward to me going in for therapy, I took every professor's advice, and I said, you know what, it's time, I really need help. And I decided to go and ask for help. Get to the therapist, 1 hour sessions. I would be 45 minutes into the session, and I would barely touch on anything that has truly affected me. And when I get to that point of finally feeling like I'm ready to open up, usually they're like, well, we have a couple more minutes. Do you want to wrap up now, and we could pick up where you left off next week? And then the same thing happens over and over every single time you go in, where I go back the next week and I start all over again. I start the story, what is going on, and I spread everything out without getting to sort of my root cause. And until I actually switched multiple different doctors I've worked with, and I'm not putting anyone down because they all helped in a certain way, but there was one day we were just casually talking, and I mentioned to her that I like writing, and she was like, well, I've actually just came back from this class that we're discussing, and we're learning about something called written exposure therapy. And she was like, since you like the idea of writing, do you think that is something that you'd like to try? And I was like, sure, why not? And we decided to try it. And the first day I did it, I came back home. I was supposed to go to clinic afterwards. I had The morning half day I didn't have classes. The evening half day I had clinic. So I went to my appointment at the VA, came back home, and I just sat down, turned the TV on, and I was like, all right, let me just eat lunch, let me get prepared, and then I'll get ready for clinic in the afternoon. Within a few minutes of just sitting there, like, I actually felt that weight lifted off of my shoulder. Everything that I sort of held on to that I wanted to talk about, I was able to get a little bit out in writing, but just from writing parts of it, I felt such a significant relief. A relief bigger than I've felt with a whole year or more of doing talk therapy. So from my experience, like I said, it's something that I've found that has been helpful, and that is why I wanted to emphasize that don't just stick to one type of therapy, or don't just give up hope because you tried one type of therapy and it didn't work for you. There are different types of therapy that may work for different types of people. For me, like I said, I like art, I like drawing, I like coloring, I like writing. So using these things were very beneficial for me to help me get things out. There are a lot of other people who are a lot more comfortable to open up talking. I've had patients who would just come in and they would, as soon as like, okay, what's going on? And they would open up to their world about it. And they would tell you every single thing that is going on. And it happens. There are people who are comfortable enough to talk about different aspects. Even within people who are comfortable to talk about certain aspects of trauma, they may not necessarily be comfortable enough to talk about all aspects of their trauma. So sometimes they would be willing to be open up through talking, but then other types of trauma that they've dealt with, they would rather have the option of doing writing. They'd rather have the option of doing art. And this is what I've used with my patients. I have them figure out what they like doing. And I don't necessarily have a structured way of doing it. I sort of give my patients a little bit of leeway in terms of having them choose what they want. If they want to combine talking and writing, talking and drawing, that is what I have them do. Sometimes they send it, sometimes I have them interpret how they felt afterwards. But that's a big part of it, is allowing you to be creative in letting things go. And this is where a big part of it will come in through the healing process. And as the title of the book goes, root causes, the healing branches. Root causes means that there's multiple causes to what is going on. And the healing branches means that there's lots of opportunities for healing. And I've actually found this out through doing my thesis. And if you go on Google, again, if you search for PTSD therapies, you'd be limited as to what comes up. And if you keep digging, you'd realize that there's a lot of scientific research that has been done on so many different types of healing therapy, from things like cognitive behavioral therapy, things written exposure therapy, art therapy, animal therapy, writing therapy, water therapy, various types of therapy all around. I know people who have animals and pets, they find that they have a connection to them, and animals do have that connection to human. They could read us out a lot faster than we could read each other out. So they could sense things a lot faster, and sometimes just having them being involved in our healing, it's definitely a big step in that. So I'm going to take this opportunity again to invite each one of the speakers to say something that stood out, or one thing that stood out the most to them from this book. But before I have them do that, again, I want to remind everybody of the website for the book. It's traumatoptsd.com. Again, it's going to take you to a link to Amazon to purchase the book. It's currently at $3.99 US. I'm going to leave it on at that price for a couple of days, and then over the course of the weekend, the price would go up. So it's a special being run for the launch. The print version of the book would be released next month. Pre-orders will also be starting from this weekend as well. And it would be the same exact website, traumatoptsd.com. Once you go into that website, it would give you the link to pre-order the book as well. Because I didn't have, or actually because I liked different versions of the cover, and I want to say thanks to my designer who was actually one of my sergeants on deployment, Sergeant Keones. I want to say a special thanks to him for being the designer for my cover and for working with me, because we went back and forth quite a bit, and eventually we came up with a set cover. And because I also shared the cover to various people, I noticed that the cover itself had two options that were most popular: a black cover and a white cover. So I'm actually giving people the option of choosing whichever cover for the print version of the book. So again, I want to say a special thanks to Sergeant Q. I want to say a special thanks to Staff Sergeant Edwards for helping me actually come up with the title Trauma to PTSD. I went back and forth with the title, and he was one of the ones that helped me narrow it down to Trauma to PTSD. So I want to say a special thanks to him. And I want to say a special thanks again to each and everyone who is joining here today, and thanks for all the lovely feedback and the comments on both Facebook and Instagram. Special thanks for that. Does anybody have any questions for me? Doesn't seem like we have any questions. So again, like I said, the website to the book is traumatoptsd.com. The advantage of this book is to be able to help people understand that trauma is not necessarily just one thing. It's a combination of things. It's not meant to be where trauma is only something that has been formally diagnosed. I actually was having this conversation with one of my cousins yesterday about how common trauma is, how common stress is to everyone, and how common it is that we don't necessarily get to the root cause. We don't always understand what is going on and why it's going on. And as a result, we have that huge stigma that stays towards the topic of trauma, stays away from the topic of talking about our stresses and stuff like that. So it's important that we take the opportunity to understand that it's not necessarily something, PTSD is not necessarily something that you have to wait till you're formally diagnosed to start working on healing. You have to start working on it from the second that it happened. The faster you could identify the trauma that is going on in your life, it's the faster you would be able to heal yourself. One thing that I've talked about in the book is something called the onion, sort of like the onion layers of trauma. And basically what it is, it's basically where you go every time that trauma happens to you, it keeps building up, and if it stays unprocessed, it keeps building up, and eventually it sort of acts like a magnet for you. So it becomes a layer upon a layer each time, and as fast as you try to sort of deal with one layer of trauma, you may find another layer of trauma coming up. So it's important to understand that trauma is not two-dimensional or one-dimensional. It's three-dimensional. So the more and more you work on trauma, it's the more and more that you would be able to find that you could heal. It would be easier for you to be able to pick up on certain types of trauma. There's an aspect of the book that talks about things like identifying triggers. The more you practice those things, the more it becomes easier for you to identify certain triggers. And triggers are basically something that happens to you, and it's very common and everyday things that happen that puts you into, back into having an issue with PTSD. you go to the point where you re-experience some of the traumas that you've been through, and it's not necessarily where it's not necessarily something that I'm on the chain. So it's not necessarily something where because you're dealing with the trauma that it's going to just stop all in one. It's as fast as you start dealing with layers by layers, it would actually be causing sort of problem where you might find that one trauma would bring up another trauma. When you start working on triggers, like I said, triggers are something that sort of puts you back into re-experiencing the trauma, re-experiencing the PTSD symptoms. And it could be very simple things, things that are everyday things. It could be sounds that you're used to. And like I mentioned in my little sharing of things that I've been through, where one of the things that happened when I came back from deployment was that I felt comfortable falling asleep with the background sounds of the helicopter. While that was comforting for me, for other people that might be traumatic. There are also points and times where things would happen that would create an effect for individuals. So sometimes it smells, sometimes it may be visual things. So you may see somebody running and it would trigger a reaction into you. Sometimes it might be where you would see somebody doing something. Sometimes it may be a smell. Sometimes it might be I use in the book an example of rape as being a traumatic event, and one of the triggers could potentially be in the smell of a specific alcohol or the taste of a specific alcohol. When somebody goes into that, they find that it triggers that reaction for them, and they go back into that panic mode. And the goal is to get out of that panic mode as much as we could. So I'm having a little technical difficulties to get my Zoom team back on to give me a little bit of reviews. But I want to take this opportunity to read some of the reviews that I've had while I try to get the Zoom back on. So one review is that comes from Dr. Victoria Chan. She's an ND. She's the founder of the Banish Anxiety Method. And she said, so very much needed, meaning the book is very much needed. I feel like the common way PTSD is discussed is very 2D, when in reality PTSD is exactly what is described as it is, being like an onion, which is then also connected to so many other different ideas, individuals, communities, and generations. This book highlights how intricate PTSD is and how many areas it affects. This is the type of discussion that needs to happen more in healthcare, professions, schools, and also in the public. It's easy to follow, understand, and it highlights points that need to be more well known because it can be make or break factor for some people's and their communities' healing. I especially love how packed this text is with practical knowledge. Many books give you the theories without action, but your book gives the power back to the people. Your passion and expertise shines through this text. So again, I want to say thanks very much to Dr. Victoria Chan, naturopathic doctor, and she's the founder of the Banish Anxiety Method. I've had the opportunity to work with her at the Your Healthy Mind Summit and listen to one of her presentations there, and she's definitely a great resource for anxiety. Another review is from Dr. Stephanie Drous, who was actually my advisor for my thesis, and she said it's very badly needed. Overall, this is great information and delivered in a professional and gentle tone that I think will serve its readers well. Outstanding sections, including the chapters on boundaries and the chapters dealing with transgenerational or intergenerational trauma and social justice. The worksheets for triggers and the worksheets to develop a plan for dealing with triggers were also quite well. So that was the feedback from Dr. Stephanie Draus. Again, she was my advisor for my thesis, and because she was also my advisor for my thesis, I decided that she would be fit to help me sort of expand my knowledge in this book. So I want to say a special thanks to her. Karen Baker, or Carrie, who's you guys met earlier, she said it's highly recommended. I think many people who struggle could benefit from this. It could be the first step to getting help. It could help people who already have received help and are ready to do things on their own. It's great. I learned a lot from it myself. Though I do not have PTSD as you mentioned, we all have trauma of some kind. I especially love the part about boundaries, the porous, the hard boundaries, picturing a wall, then picturing a situation and deciding what the wall should look like. Really helpful. So again, thank you, Carrie, for that review. I'm just gonna pause for a second and try to see if I could get back onto Zoom here. In the meanwhile, as I try to do that, I want to say again that the website to go on to for this book, it's traumatoptsd.com. The book is currently as an ebook on Amazon. The print version will be released soon. Over the weekend, pre-orders will be starting for the book itself, and it will be at a reduced cost. And then after pre-orders are finished, then the cost of the book would be going up. So still having a little difficulties with the Zoom. So to those who are on here, that are on either Facebook or Instagram that were on the Zoom meeting, again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I'm gonna try to get through the various reviews through the ones that you sent me. So Dr. Kirsten Dewitt, naturopathic doctor and registered acupuncturist, she was also on earlier on the Zoom, and she's on here as well. I want to say a special thanks to you again for your review and for your time, and thank you for putting together your Healthy Mind Summit. As I mentioned during that, it was a great event in order to bring more and more awareness to the topic of mental health. So a special thanks to you for doing that. So her review says, this book is essential reading for everyone. It provides a greater understanding for those with PTSD and could help create a more compassionate community as a whole, helping to increase awareness and access to necessary care and support. Dr. Ramdan provides the framework necessary for truly understanding the spectrum of trauma and PTSD, the many ways we can each experience it differently, as well as how we can begin to better support ourselves and those around us with PTSD. This book is foundational for both those with PTSD and those who may know or work with those with PTSD. So thank you, Dr. Kirsten, for the review. The next review is from Dr. Nikita Patel, another naturopathic doctor. Her review says, great work for so many stuck in trauma. This brings hope to thrive, not just survive. The holistic information in this book is refreshing and thorough for anyone wanting to heal from PTSD. Dr. Ramdan skillfully guides the reader on what it means to truly heal from a trauma, even when it is not diagnosed as PTSD. With Dr. Ramdan's guidance through this book, you will be on your path to thriving in life. So again, a special thanks to Dr. Nikita Patel for doing this review for me. Dr. Mansi Vera, another naturopathic doctor, her review says this book is absolutely needed, so well timed because we are all globally going through a traumatic experience in addition to our own individual experiences of trauma. Great information about PTSD and ways to understand the various types of traumas and how to heal from them. The worksheets are also such powerful tools that help us start to access our past, understand these complexities involved in our traumatic experiences, and ultimately learn how to begin to heal. So again, special thanks to Dr. Mansi Vera for her review. Again, before we go on, I want to drop in here to say traumatoptsd.com is the website to visit to purchase the book. So continuing on with some more of the reviews, Dr. Sarah Zara, also a naturopathic doctor, she says this book is extremely needed. It really hits home on how our traumas affects us, both initially and long term. It appeals to pathos and gives us hope for the future. It is excellent. I cried during some parts of the book. I would 10 out of 10 recommend this book, and I will be telling all of my patients who deal with all types of mental health issues to read it. So again, thank you, Dr. Sarah, for your review. Dr. Kanta Buduram, again, special thanks to him for his review. His review says it is needed to help those be guided through the PTSD phenomenon, and in helping to recognize the signs in ways they would not have seen on their own. Very well written, conversational, and easy to follow. So again, thank you, Dr. Kanta, for your review. Staff Sergeant Edwards, he's also a pastor, and we've had the wonderful opportunity to work together in the military. He was also one of the individuals who's done a review for the book, and again, a special thanks to him for helping me narrow down the title to Trauma to PTSD for my book. His review states, as a military person who have dealt closely with PTSD, I strongly believe this book is severely needed. Right now I am a pastor, and this book opened my eyes to many things that I did not see or knew about. This book will help me in communicating more effectively with individuals dealing with PTSD. Very informative. Dr. Ramdan took me down a road of information and education as it pertains to PTSD with this book. I related to aspects of this book and got some clarity to some unanswered questions I had. Well done. This book was well researched and written, and the added documents at the end surely helps with understanding where you are on the spectrum of PTSD. So again, thank you, Pastor Edwards, Sergeant Edwards as I know him. Thank you again very much for your review. Coach Kai is somebody I met through working with the Vibio app. He's an MD, and he's actually doing more of the health coaching now. So again, I want to take this opportunity to say a special thanks to Coach Kai for being one of the individuals that did a review for the book. His review says this is 110% needed. I realized in my own personal and spiritual journey how the roots of a lot of my pain and suffering are from trauma. So informative, and I love how you are able to describe trauma-related concepts through simple stories and analogies. I've read the first chapters and the boundary section, and it is really good. This makes an excellent PDF read. You cover a lot of breadth and areas that I love how you include practical worksheets at the end. So again, thank you, Dr. Kai or Coach Kai, for doing your review. Dr. Botwick, some of you guys met her through Zoom. She had a chance earlier on to say a couple of words about the book as well. So her review was, there is a great need for this type of book as trauma and PTSD are not well understood nor well recognized in the American landscape. Dr. Ramdan's work is very timely as there are increasing numbers of hurting individuals who need to understand the what and how and whys of their situations. His book integrates important aspects of conversational and holistic modalities which with few exceptions is lacking in the choices and success of treatment programs and options. So again, thank you, Dr. Botwick, for your review. Darren Jagannath, it's somebody that I work with from University of Bridgeport. He's also a religious leader, and he's done his master's as well. His review, he also has family members who has been in the military as well. His review states, we have all experienced some sort of trauma in our lives, regardless of if we are able to identify it or not. Dr. Ramdan has done a remarkable job explaining and shedding light to a subject that I believe needs to be talked about more. The more this is addressed, the possibility for healing will be even closer than we can imagine. Dr. Ramdan's timing with this book could not come at a more appropriate time. We can't keep ignoring our past or even our current experiences. Trauma to PTSD by Dr. Ramdan is an outstanding piece of writing. He purposed to bring clarity to the subject matter in this book, and he delivered it in many ways. I am quite impressed at how detailed Dr. Ramdan is in explaining various components of the book. Furthermore, the examples he provided makes it easy for someone not familiar with the subject matter to gain insights that can be life-changing for the individuals and others in their circle of influence and beyond. There is something that everyone can learn from Trauma to PTSD. This is a must-read book for yourself, and certainly a gift to someone who you care about. If I must say, I can't wait for Dr. Ramdan's future books. So again, thank you, Darren, for that review. The next review is by Dr. Sarah Gekier. She's also an ND. Her review, says, everyone needs to read this type of book. Even if you do not think you've been through trauma, this book will give an understanding that will lead readers to more fulfilling relationships and greater understanding of the people in their lives. This book puts the most important concepts of trauma into digestible parts, while simultaneously teaching how it fits into the big picture of life and society as we know it today. There's a lot of resources that teach the different parts of trauma. Dr. Ramdan put together those parts together into one cohesive model that addresses both the big picture and the individual levels. If you have a clear comprehension of this work and take action when he suggests to take action, your life has no choice but to radically heal. So this is just a small clip of Dr. Sarah's review. Again, I want to say a special thanks to Dr. Sarah for her review. The next review is from Dr. Emily Cleveland. Dr. Ramdan has wisdom and experience beyond his years, and he has done a brilliant job in writing this book. I feel this book applies to everyone: healthcare providers of all kinds, employers, employees, friends, family, spouses, children, parents, teachers, you name it. Dr. Ramdan starts the book with incredible details on what PTSD is, how it can start, and its many manifestations. He points out the ones we can recognize easily because our culture has highlighted them in movies or support groups. But then he also describes the many types of PTSD that we don't recognize so quickly. The type that are subtle are often the hardest to recognize, both by person with PTSD and those around them. Knowing all trauma carries unlimited potential for shaping our way of moving through life. Dr. Ramdan describes very approachable ways of addressing one's PTSD and also ways of making sure one can maneuver through situations that would normally trigger them to spiral. All these reviews would be on my social media pages, so Universal Tree Health Clinic, and both on Facebook and Instagram. So again, instead of me just constantly reading out all of these, there would be the reviews on there as well. So once again, I want to say a special thanks to each and everyone today for joining in on these live both on Facebook and Instagram. I want to say a special thanks to each and everyone who has already made purchases, and I want to remind everybody of the website again to go towards to purchase the book, traumatoptsd.com. Again, it will take you to a link to get to Amazon to order the ebook version today. The price of the ebook is $3.99. I'm going to keep it at that price until Sunday, and then come midnight onto Monday morning, the price would be going up. So again, special thanks to each and everyone for joining in. I want to say a special thanks to one person and individual, Dr. Matthew Funk. He's a chiropractic doctor. As part of my journey getting to the idea of publishing this book today, Dr. Matthew Funk, he was the clinician that was a supervisor for me when I used to attend University of Bridgeport as a patient to the chiropractic clinic, and that's how I met him. University of Bridgeport held something called a research day. They do an annual research day, and I, based on recommendations from various professors in the naturopathic program, they suggested utilizing my thesis, expanding on it and putting it into a poster and presenting it at the University of Bridgeport Research Day. So I had an opportunity to present there. Dr. Funk was actually one of the persons who were coming around to review each posters and pretty much grade them. And one of his advice of my thesis and seeing the poster was that there's a lot of information compiled all into one place. And one of the reviews said that there's a lot of information all in one place. And I know Dr. Kirsten also mentioned it, that a lot of things in this book, it's a lot of information all in one place, all at the same time with easy access. And what Dr. Fong said to me on that day is that there is no way that you could go and find that type of research or resource. There's no books out there that had this accessibility to that. This happened in 2018. I wrote my thesis in 2016, prior to me going on deployment. I wanted to get that submitted before I went away on deployment because I wanted to make sure I have that aspect of stress out of my way as part of my my requirement for graduating as a doctor. So again, a special thanks to Dr. Fong for being one of those persons who pushed me towards inspiring and being drawn towards actually publishing a book today. And today it's an ebook, and in a couple of days it would be a print copy that would be available. I know there's a lot of patients in Trinidad. There's people that are listening from various parts of the world currently, from the US, from Canada, and from Trinidad as well. I want to say a special thanks again to each and everyone for joining in today. To those in Trinidad, my goal is to bring some of the books towards Trinidad, into Trinidad, so that you could reduce the cost rather than you having to necessarily pay the cost there and pay the extra shipping and handling. I'm hoping that by me bringing in bulk orders, it would reduce the cost for people who want access to the book in Trinidad. So that is an option if you want to wait for it. That should be happening in July. Again, I'd have to wait and see the logistics of how things are based off of delays with the whole COVID situation that is going on here in Trinidad. So again, for those listening in from Trinidad and have interest in getting the physical copy, if you want to get it from me, again, you could contact me either through Universal Tree Health Clinic, either through Facebook or Instagram. Some of you guys have my phone numbers. You can contact me there as well, and reach out to me when that time comes. I will be posting that on social media, again, the day and the times of that part of it. Once the prints are ready for shipping in the US, again, I will post that out for everyone else who wants to buy, because it will be shipped from the US and shipped to various places because it's currently being published in the US. Again, a special thanks to Dr. Tertia Hamilton for being the one that working on helping me get this book published, and a special shout outs to Natural Path Publications for being the one to publish my book. Without them, I would have to probably do it as a self-published book, and I feel like that would have been an added stress for me. And then the next book would have been me adding that part of my story into part 2 of this book. So again, special thanks to Dr. Tertia for being a big part of this. A special thanks to all my family members who have supported, all my patients. I want to say a special thanks to them because I've learned a lot from them. This book is not just about my knowledge. It's also from my experience that I've gained with working with patients. And this goes patients all the way back from when I was at University of Bridgeport as a student intern, from my time as a secondary and then following up as a time as a primary in the clinic. I had the opportunity to work with several patients. There's one patient that stood out a lot to me, and I had, I guess, a closer relationship working with her. She was a PTSD patient, and the reason I said I have a closer relationship with her because she's opened up to me about a lot, and she's actually been helpful to me dealing with some of my own personal stress and traumas and stuff like that. And she gave me one advice one day, and I'm going to share it with you all today here as well. She said, it's always good to, as a PTSD patient or anyone in general, it's important to share your story, because 2 things happen when you share your story. 1, you will learn something about yourself, and 2, others will learn something that could be beneficial to them. So again, with that being said, remember that trauma, PTSD, stress, all of these things are real, and you don't necessarily have to wait till you're formally diagnosed with PTSD to say stress is affecting me, trauma is affecting me, because PTSD means post-traumatic stress disorder. So it includes the words of trauma, it talks about stress. So these things build up, they add on day to day, every day. There's things that they are good stress and they are bad stress, but they all add up. And the more that we could deal with it as we go along, the easier it becomes to deal with the bigger aspect of it. One thing that I mentioned in my book is something called the straw that broke the camel back. And this talks also about how trauma is and how stress could be. And basically what it means is that every day that we go through life, we're constantly exposed to stress. Stress builds up on each other if we don't deal with it as they come along. When we don't deal with the stress as they build up, it sort of creates an additional stress to us. So I like using the analogy of a boiling pot of water. Our current self is that water inside that pot. Our past traumas is a cover on top the pot, and all our present traumas and stress becomes the fire under the pot. So when we have unprocessed trauma, when we have a lot of unprocessed stress that we've allowed to accumulate over time, that builds up as extra pressure on top of the pot. The heat that is our constant stressors that happens in our everyday life, that becomes extra heat under the pot. As we all know, heat to water would increase the pressure inside the pot. The cover being on top of the pot, more pressure staying down on the pot would mean increased pressure inside the pot. Eventually it will get to the point that it becomes explosive, so the cover would pop off the pot. We've all seen it. Whoever's been in a kitchen, whoever's seen a pot of water boiling, they would know that there is potential for the water to overflow. If there's a cover on there, it tends to be a little bit more of a severe impact of how explosive it could be, with the stronger that cover is on there. And for people who use pressure cookers, I guess you would understand that even more in terms of that analogy. And that same analogy applies to the stress that happens in our everyday life. So again, a special thanks to each and everyone for joining in today. I saw a couple of guys that I went to school with at St. Stephen's College joining in. I want to say a special thanks to you guys for joining in. I saw a couple of doctors that I've been to school with and I got the opportunity to know at University of Bridgeport. I want to say a special thanks to you guys for joining in. All my family and friends, I want to say a special thanks for joining in again. Anyone that I missed out, again, I apologize, and I want to say a special thanks for joining. So today is, like I said, it's the official ebook launching. The website to go to get my book is traumatoptsd.com. It will take you to the link directly to Amazon to purchase the book. In the next coming days, the pre-orders for the print copies will be available to anyone in the US and Canada. To those in Trinidad, you could also pre-order there as well, but I know there's an additional cost of shipping for that. And for that reason, I do plan on bringing in some books in July. So I want to say, if you do want to wait for that, there's definitely that opportunity to wait till I bring in the bulk order, and in that way you could save on shipping. So rather than every individual having to pay for shipping, if it comes in as a bulk order, we could save on shipping, and you have access to the information at a lower cost rather than having to pay your individual shipping. So once again, I want to say a special thanks to each and everyone who's been part of my journey, all the way from working through building my thesis, from friends in school, co-workers, from patients, to professors in school, to healthcare providers that I've met with, a couple in New York, a couple in Connecticut, and various doctors at different of them, for being part of my journey of my thesis. Everyone else who has contributed even afterwards, I want to say a special thanks to you. And like I said, my journey to getting this book published has been a learning experience for me. Everything that is written in this book is not, I would not say, and I would not claim it to be 100% my own. I would say it's as a result of the experience that I've gained from a lot of people, both from working with other doctors, preceptoring with doctors, reading books from different doctors, reading their reviews, listening to different podcasts, seeing patients with varying types of traumas and their varying types of experiences. And like I said, everybody have their own personal traumas and stresses that they've been through. Don't ever undervalue the effects of the trauma, and I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way. Too often we do overlook a lot of our traumas and the effects that the stress has on our lives. So I want to say with that, that take an opportunity each day to do something that you like doing. Take an opportunity each day to decompress from the stresses in your life, because it's going to make a huge impact on your life. Don't wait till the stress becomes too much, especially now and within the past year or so with the whole COVID situation. I know it's in a different situation for everyone that is listening here today. It's probably different in terms of how this pandemic has affected them. I know some people are affected more, some people are feeling the increased effects of where things have become a lot better for them, but there's still people who are under restrictions. So I want to say that stress is still there. Even as things start improving, stress will continue to be there, and stress, for as long as we live, stress will be part of our lives. So don't allow stress to become a burden to you. Basically, what you want to do is take opportunities each and every single day to find things to do that you like, find things to do to help you decompress. Don't let that stress build up, don't let it affect you, and don't let it affect the people around you. Sometimes you might be able to figure things out, especially those who would be reading the book. You'd have an opportunity to see things that and understand things that you may not have necessarily understood before. Again, I want to say, take that opportunity, take that learning opportunity to spread that knowledge to everyone else around you. If there's somebody that you could help them. You don't necessarily have to share my book with them. You don't have to tell them purchase my book, but the important thing is telling them to get help. And getting help doesn't necessarily mean coming to me as an individual. I'm not necessarily here to only promote myself, but I'm here to promote the topic of trauma and PTSD. I'm here to promote reducing the stigmatization towards the topic of mental health, towards the topic of trauma and PTSD. It's a lot more common than we realize. The effects of stress is a lot more common than we realize. So, like I said, it's important that each and every day we take time out to deal with the stresses in our life. Find people who you feel comfortable enough to talk with. find things that you do. I've mentioned before things like art therapy, writing therapy, any type of expressive therapy. They're all options of things that you could do. Anything that you like doing, you could convert it as an expressive therapy in order to release the effects of your trauma and the effects of your individual aspects of stressors. I want to say also that as a special, I am doing an event from July 7th onwards. It's a 7-day event called Forgive to Freedom Challenge. Each and everyone who was logged on to here today, as an opportunity, it's coming as a free opportunity to everyone who purchases the book. I just need you to send a snapshot of the receipt, be it through the ebook or the pre-order of the copy. Everybody who sends it to me prior to July 1st will be able to access that challenge. Also, anyone who has been on here today listening to this live, just email me at universaltreehealthclinic@gmail.com. universaltreehc@gmail.com, or message me on either one of these social media pages, on Facebook or Instagram, Universal Tree Health Clinic. Again, that email is universaltreehc@gmail.com. Email me if you have an interest in being part of that 7 days forgiveness challenge. That is something I've also written about in the book itself, as forgiveness as part of healing from trauma. A lot of times trauma happen and we hold on to things about it. We hold on to different types of regrets, and a lot of times people would talk about their traumas and they would get minimal effects, but not until you're able to forgive yourself and forgive others are you truly able to heal and completely let go of certain things, certain aspects of trauma. So again, this is a free opportunity for everybody who's joined in on the live today, everyone who's purchasing the book. This is a free opportunity for you to join in on that 7 days challenge. Again, I want to say a special thanks to each and everyone who's joining today. And one more time, I'm going to remind you of the website, traumatoptsd.com. It's the website to buy the ebook today, and then soon after it would be, you could still utilize the same link to get to the ebook and the print copy. The print version will be available for pre-orders this weekend. And then like I said, to those who are in Trinidad, the print copies, I am planning on bringing some of the print copies into Trinidad to help reduce the cost on the added shipping that you'd have to do it as an individual. So if I could help reduce the cost, I could potentially be increasing the access to more people benefiting from this book. Again, the website is traumatoptsd.com. My email address is universaltreehc@gmail.com. Again, I'm going to show this. This is the cover of the book. I'm using this as an opportunity to share with everyone that art therapy is a healing therapy, and I shared different versions of the covers and asked for feedback from many people. I want to say a special thanks to everyone who's given me back feedback. Turns out that there's two popular versions, and as a result I decided with the print copy there will be two versions of the print copy, one with a black background and one with a white background. So individuals will have an option to choose something that they feel most connected to. Unfortunately, it's difficult to get one that would fit everybody's preference. So again, I want to say a special thanks to each and everyone who took time out, who replied to me and gave me the feedback on the book. So thank you for that. Like I said, I'm looking forward to each and everyone's support. Thank you each and everyone for your comments on the book. There's both sides from on Instagram and from on Facebook. I see each and every one of your comments, and I don't want to miss anybody, so I just want to say a overall special thanks to each and everyone. So again, thank you all for joining in today. I really appreciate each and everyone's support. Please do share the information to as much people as you can. Anyone that you think can benefit from this book, benefit from learning more about this topic of trauma and PTSD, please share this book. Even if you don't share this book or the website, at least bringing that conversation to people and making it bringing more awareness to this topic is one of my main goals. So again, I want to say a special thanks to each and everyone. I want to say a special thanks to God for, I guess, without God's blessings, none of this could happen. So a special thanks to them, and special thanks to all my family members who have been cheering me on to get me through this each and every day. My parents are like, how's the stage of the books? I know they're here. We tried to get them logged on. Then they got cut off, and then hopefully they're back on. Hopefully they're hearing it. But I want to say a special thanks to them and all my extended family members. Again, thank you each and everyone, from patients to friends to family, co-workers, colleagues in the profession, to colleagues who deal with the topic of trauma and PTSD, to friends from all the way from primary school all the way through college. I want to say a special thanks to each and every one of you who have been able to join in today. So thank you again very much for joining today. And this is the last time I'm going to say it before I say goodbye and thanks. But again, the website is www.trauma2ptsd.com. Again, the link would take you to the ebook today. After today, it would take you both to a link that would give you the ebook and to pre-order the print copy if you want. My email is universal3hc@gmail.com for anyone who wants to join in on the Forgive to Freedom Challenge. It's a 7-day event that is happening from the 7th of July until the 13th of July. I would like to say, take that opportunity. If you feel like forgiveness is something that you want to work on, please send an email to me with a copy of a snapshot of your receipt from purchasing the book, or just send me an email if you're one of those people who's been on the live today. I saw Siobhan sent me a question here saying, sharing a little bit about the benefits of buying this book. So one of the benefits that I would say to buying this book is that it brings a little bit more awareness to the topic of trauma and PTSD. Each and every one of us, regardless of whether we want to admit it or not, we are affected by trauma in some way, shape, or form or size. Everyone would react differently to trauma. Everyone would react different to stressors. This book highlights different aspects of traumas, talking about things like how racism, social injustice, inequality, how those things become an aspect of trauma, how it becomes a risk factor to develop in PTSD. Talks about things like intergenerational and transgenerational trauma. It talks about things like the cycle of abuse, where people go, I'm sure people have seen it, where people who grow up in an abusive home, sometimes you see that they tend to seek out abusive relationship, or you see an individual who goes from one abusive relationship to another abusive relationship. A lot of times they don't necessarily recognize that they are stuck sort of in that trauma, and they keep continuing that cycle of abuse or cycle of trauma. So the book brings awareness to topics like these. The book also brings a little bit of awareness to different types of healing modalities. While I am a naturopathic doctor and an acupuncturist, and that is what I use, I'm not here to say promote just that. I'm here to bring awareness that there's a benefit to everything. There's a benefit to pharmaceuticals. There's a benefit to different type of naturopathic therapies, acupuncture, that could all benefit mental health. Things like talk therapy, homeopathy, hydrotherapy, mental health, discussions, group therapy, art therapy, creative, expressive therapy. These are all different types of therapy that I highlighted in the book. There's a section on worksheets that talks about things like triggers, helping people to identify their triggers and understanding their triggers so that they could be able to heal a little bit faster from PTSD. So that is some of the main benefits of the book without giving out every single information on the book. But that's kind of the general gist. The main benefit would be is really bringing more and more awareness to the topic of trauma and PTSD. I want that the readers of this book be comfortable enough to be able to discuss the topic of trauma and PTSD, be it they discuss it with their healthcare provider, be it they discuss it with their friends, their family, whoever it is. That is my main goal really for this book, because we're in the year 2021 and 2020 was a hell of a year. It was the perfect storm for people with PTSD, where a lot of things came back up and a lot more stressful event for people. It's the perfect storm for people to develop PTSD as well. So hence sort of the timing for the book as well, releasing it. Also, June month is PTSD Awareness Month, so hence the reason for releasing this book. And I guess I really pushed Dr. Tusha, and I want to say again special thanks to her for accommodating me and helping me get to this point to be able to publish the book during this time. One thing before I forget, 10% of the sales of this book will be donated to the Headstrong Project. It's a veteran organization. It was started by veterans. There's a lot of veterans involved in it, but the main goal is to focus on things like mental health and various conditions associated with mental health, not just PTSD, but the broad spectrum of mental health, PTSD, anxiety, whatever it is. But the Headstrong Project, it's an organization that provides free healthcare access to veterans and their family members affected by any type of mental health issues. So I want to say thanks to them for what they do, and as a result I'm donating 10% of all the sales for the next 3 months towards them. After that, my plan is that every 3 months I want to find different organizations that deal with mental health issues. So anyone who has any ideas for organizations, feel free to share it with me. Either send me a message directly on my email, universal3hc@gmail.com, or either on Instagram or Facebook. So just send me a direct message about the organization that you feel that may be beneficial from it. Again, I'm really looking to support people who deal with this type of issues, because it's a very highly stigmatized issue still, and I feel like the more and more awareness that we could bring towards the topic, the greater chance of reducing the stigmatization towards it. So again, thank you all for joining today. Again, my website for the book is www.traumatoptsd.com. My email address is universal3hc@gmail.com for anyone who wants to join in on the Forgive to Freedom Challenge that will be starting on the 7th of July. Just send me an email, and this is my way of saying thank you for joining in today. And then anyone who purchases the book, again, you have access to the Forgive to Freedom Challenge as well. So just send me a snapshot of the order that you purchased the book. Again, my goal today is to hit bestseller on Amazon, and that happens only through one way. It's through a high amount of purchases within a small amount of time. So hence keeping this live event of launching the book as one, and two, and asking each and every one of you guys to help promote the book. So again, thank you each and everyone for taking this opportunity, taking this time out today to join in on this live. And I do hope that you continue to support, and like I said, the biggest support for me and this book will be reducing that stigmatization towards the topic of trauma and PTSD and stress, making it a more common and everyday topic, and bringing the awareness to more and more people about this topic. So again, thank you each and everyone for joining me today, and do look forward to where this book takes me. So take care. Bye.